Colton Herta is under consideration for rides throughout the Formula One paddock, promoting debate on the American's ability to obtain the super license required to compete in the Global Series. The 22-year-old Californian and IndyCar star frequently has been mentioned as a candidate for a seat next season with AlphaTauri. A sticking point continues to be Herta's lack of a super license, and speculation that F1's governing body may consider granting Herta an exemption. That idea received pushback from the team principals at the Dutch Grand Prix. You have to keep in mind that when we made the decision about the super license and the points, it was to protect F1 and the drivers, to avoid having 10 drivers coming into F1 with big budgets and no results in the past and taking 50% of the grid, Alfa Romeo team principal Fred Vasseur said on Saturday. We did it on purpose, and I think it was a good decision. Drivers need to accumulate 40 points to obtain a super license based on their best 3 performances over the previous 4 seasons. Herta is expected to have just 32 points ahead of 2023, and although he can gain points by participating in F1 practice sessions, he doesn't currently have any sessions scheduled this year, even though he's got a testing contract with McLaren. Either way, he's not expected to hit the 40-point mark, and there's debate on whether the International Automobile Federation, the FIA, could apply force majeure to grant Herta a super license. From my point of view, it has nothing to do with force majeure, Vasseur said. Now, if the FIA wants to stop the process of the points and the super license, that's another story. They can do it, it's up to them to decide if they want to stop the system, and we can survive without the system, but it's nothing to do for me with force majeure. Vasseur has more information on Herta's status than others because Michael Andretti attempted to purchase Alfa last season and put Herta in one of the seats. We had discussions last year with Andretti. It's not a secret. Herta was on the table and he was not eligible for a super license at this stage, Vasseur said. An issue is that the FIA doesn't govern IndyCar and thus doesn't rate it as highly as other global series, making it more difficult for IndyCar drivers to earn a super license. The IndyCar grid currently boasts former F1 drivers Romain Grosjean, Marcus Ericsson and Alexander Rossi, whose 2015 season marked the last time an American was on the F1 grid. Callum Ilott and Christian Lundgaard, both fighting for Rookie of the Year, came from the European junior ranks and Ilott was in the Ferrari pipeline. Haas boss Günther Steiner said he was not part of the process that designed the current rules, but would be willing to listen to proposals on overhauling the licensing system. I don't want to be sitting here saying, oh, an IndyCar race, we know it's as good as this. You cannot compare it, Steiner says. If we want to change the rule, then let's discuss it, and then fix it for the future if you think you're wrong. But there needs to be an agreement between the stakeholders in it. Steiner, who also said the team remains undecided on if it will re-sign Mick Schumacher, noted that the lack of super license has kept Herta off of Haas's list of prospects. The Haas team is owned by American businessman Gene Haas and run partly out of its North Carolina campus shared with its NASCAR team. He's not on the list at the moment because he hasn't got the super license, said Steiner, who added that Haas is considering only drivers with F1 experience. In the moment, we look more to somebody who has been already in F1. So therefore, Herta didn't make the list and he hasn't got the super license. Their comments prompted dismay from American drivers racing in IndyCar. Connor Daly, who raced in F1 Support Series between 2011 and 2014, is the son of former F1 driver Derek Daly, took issue to Steiner's reaction. Oh, what a surprise, he posted on social media. The team principal for the American F1 team is not a supporter of an American driver once again. Alexander Rossi, who moved to IndyCar after starting 5 F1 races in 2015, added, "I'm so sick of this." McLaren team principal Andreas Seidel worked with Herta in July in a 2-day test in Portugal, in which Herta impressed in his preparation and on-track performance. It was that test that perhaps raised the level of interest in bringing him to F1, and Seidel said McLaren was open to adjusting the licensing system. McLaren currently runs an IndyCar program that will expand to 3 teams next year. I think the IndyCar Championship is a high-quality, very competitive championship with top drivers, and therefore I think there's no reason why we shouldn't make sure that competitive drivers over there cannot switch to Formula One, Seidel said. Absolutely open for some flexibility there in handing a guy like Colton the super license, because at the end of it, what has he shown so far in his racing career? I have no doubt that he is absolutely able to compete in F1. And of course, this isn't the first story surrounding the future of a young driver which has dominated conversations within F1. Mercedes Formula One boss Toto Wolff is concerned that Oscar Piastri's case has set a precedent that if you're clever, you can maneuver yourself out of a young driver program. Piastri will leave Alpine to join McLaren in 2023 after a ruling by F1's Contract Recognition Board. Alpine thought it had Piastri locked down for next season, but it has been determined that Piastri was a free agent because Alpine mishandled his contractual situation. The result is McLaren was able to sign a driver Alpine has spent significant time and money developing over the past 2.5 years, with that investment including around 3,500 kilometers of testing in Alpine F1 cars. Alpine has criticised Piastri for abandoning the organisation when it honoured its commitments and had a desire to promote him to the works team eventually. And last week, Wolff hinted he was not impressed that Piastri had publicly stood against his current employer. Now, Wolff has admitted that while he has no insight into the specifics of the Piastri-Alpine saga, he is worried that F1's big teams will have to be more careful with how they manage young drivers in the future. What I really stand firm for is that all of us constructors are investing a lot of money in our junior programs, said Wolff. We invest human resources that go to the go-kart tracks, to the junior formulas, and in some cases it's little money, some cases it's more. George Russell and Esteban Ocon, we finance them a long way on. To know now that a precedent has been set that if you're clever you can maneuver yourself out is something that's clearly not good for the industry. So we will be employing even more lawyers for even stricter contracts. But for me, I believe in the integrity also of the drivers we have. I think we need to be positive to try and find talent and develop them, but hope on the character. Wolff was speaking after qualifying at the Dutch Grand Prix. Earlier in the day, McLaren team boss Andreas Seidel has spoken out against comments from external observers critical of the Piastri situation. He even argued at the time that there was no broader issue of junior programs, and all this should do is make such programs be more careful with the contracts that they have. Seidel said McLaren had such an example of their own a few years ago when Red Bull was interested in poaching Lando Norris, but could not because his contract was solid. Oscar was a free agent, that's why we signed him, said Seidel, and I don't think that has any impact on any of the junior programs that are around. It probably needs more of a review of which contracts are in place when you have junior programs. For example, when I look on our side, Lando was obviously a very hot topic some years ago, when there was some interest from other teams as well. But in the end, he just couldn't leave because we had everything in place we needed in order to make sure he has to stay with us. The specifics of the case do suggest that there was more at play than just Alpine leaving a loophole for Piastri to exploit. Alpine dragged out the process of turning a term sheet signed in November last year into an actual contract for 2022 and beyond. The team had to create a makeshift reserve driver agreement on the eve of the season, but it took until May for Piastri to receive a full contract proposal for 2023 to 2026. That deal also did not guarantee him an Alpine drive until 2025 at the earliest, and intended to place Piastri at the back of the grid Williams team for potentially 2 seasons. This, combined with the drawn-out process, contributed to Piastri and his management seeking to move to McLaren instead, as they felt the trust in Alpine had been eroded and McLaren was willing to offer Piastri a quicker route into a competitive seat. Asked by The Race if the details of the Piastri-Alpine case indicated this was a specific failure from one team not to have a driver under contract rather than an indication of a wider threat to driver programs, Wolff said, "Contracts are the underlying fundamentals of any professional commercial dealings with each other. That's clear. But in this world, you will probably be able to spot the gaps or opportunities in every contract. And then it's up to the judges to determine what the outcome is. I think I've made many mistakes in my life where I thought the contract covers all angles, and it didn't. Then it comes down to the human and to the kind of long-term perspective one has on the relationships. Again, very difficult to judge from the outside. There's always 2 parts of the story, but the boy better be quick."